They thought Adam Pearce was just another corporate yes-man. For months, wrestling fans have watched WWE's general manager stand by helplessly while Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker systematically destroyed everyone in their path, turning Monday Night Raw into their personal torture chamber without facing any real consequences. But last night, everything changed when Adam Pearce finally had enough of watching these monsters brutalize innocent wrestlers and delivered the most shocking act of executive justice in WWE history, a loaded sock filled with quarters directly to Bronson Reed's face that left the Australian powerhouse unconscious and bleeding while sending a message that will echo through the wrestling world forever: nobody is untouchable, and even authority figures have breaking points. The moment that changed everything happened at exactly 11:23 p.m. during what was supposed to be Bronson Reed's victory celebration after his latest brutal assault on Roman Reigns. Reed and his partner Braun Breaker were standing over the tribal chief's motionless body, gloating about how they had finally eliminated WWE's biggest star permanently, when Adam Pearce's music hit the speakers for the first time in over 2 years. The look on Reed's face when he heard that music was pure terror, one ringside observer later recalled. He knew immediately that his reign of terror had finally caught up with him, that someone with real authority was coming to collect the debt he'd been building with his months of criminal behavior. But this wasn't the Adam Pearce that wrestling fans remembered, the mild-mannered, diplomatic general manager who tried to solve problems through negotiation and compromise. This was something darker, more dangerous, more personally motivated by months of watching helplessly as Reed and Breaker turned his show into a weekly exhibition of criminal assault. Pearce looked different, another witness observed with a mixture of awe and fear. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he had finally moved beyond trying to manage these situations diplomatically. He was done talking, done negotiating, done pretending that corporate authority meant anything to criminals. The transformation of Adam Pearce from corporate diplomat to street justice enforcer represented more than just character development. It was the awakening of a man who had reached his absolute breaking point after watching Reed and Breaker cross every moral and legal line in their quest for dominance. "I've tried everything," Pearce's voice carried through the arena sound system with controlled fury that made everyone understand this wasn't a storyline development. "Fines, suspensions, match stipulations, corporate discipline, nothing has stopped you from treating my wrestlers like your personal victims." But Pearce's most explosive revelation concerned his discovery that Reed and Breaker's months-long reign of terror hadn't been random acts of violence, but part of a calculated campaign to eliminate specific wrestlers who posed threats to certain corporate interests. "I found the list," Pearce announced, his words hitting the arena like bombs. "The target list that someone provided to you, Reed. The names of wrestlers you were supposed to eliminate, the injuries you were supposed to inflict, the careers you were supposed to end." The revelation that Reed and Breaker had been operating from a corporate hit list transformed their months of brutal attacks from random violence into systematic assassination campaign, suggesting coordination between backstage powers and the monsters carrying out their dirty work. Roman Reigns was at the top of that list, Pearce continued, his voice building with righteous anger. Not because he was a bad performer or a difficult employee, but because someone with real power wanted him eliminated permanently. But Pearce's investigation had uncovered something even more disturbing than a corporate assassination list. He had discovered that Reed and Breaker were being paid bonuses for each successful elimination they achieved, transforming WWE into a murder-for-hire organization. $2 million, Pearce revealed, his words sending shockwaves through the wrestling world. That's what Bronson Reed was paid for putting Roman Reigns in the hospital. $2 million in bonus money for nearly ending a man's career and possibly his life. The financial incentives that Reed had been receiving for his brutal attacks explained why he had shown no remorse, no hesitation, and no concern for the permanent damage he was inflicting on his victims. Braun Breaker received similar payments. Pearce continued his devastating exposures. $1.5 million for his role in the conspiracy, plus performance bonuses for each wrestler he successfully injured. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of Pearce's revelations was his discovery that other WWE officials had been complicit in the conspiracy, providing Reed and Breaker with intelligence about their targets and ensuring they wouldn't face meaningful consequences for their crimes. "Triple H knew," Pearce announced, causing gasps throughout the arena. "Stephanie McMahon knew. Nick Khan not only knew but authorized the bonus payments. This conspiracy goes to the very top of WWE's corporate structure. The involvement of WWE's highest-ranking officials in authorizing and funding assassination campaigns against their own performers revealed a level of corporate corruption that transcended sports entertainment and entered the realm of organized crime. They turned my general manager position into a front operation," Pearce explained with obvious pain. "While I thought I was booking matches and managing storylines, they were using my authority to provide cover for systematic elimination of wrestlers who threatened their control." But Pearce's most personally devastating revelation concerned the role he had unknowingly played in enabling Reed and Breaker's crimes by providing them with access, opportunity, and corporate protection. "Every match I booked that put Roman in vulnerable positions, every backstage segment that left wrestlers isolated, every decision I made that I thought was about entertainment, they were all designed to create opportunities for assassination," Pearce continued with growing horror at his own unwitting complicity. The realization that he had been manipulated into enabling the very crimes he was trying to prevent had transformed Pearce from corporate diplomat into someone seeking personal justice for his own victimization. "They made me complicit in attempted murder," Pearce's voice cracked with emotion and rage. "They used my position, my authority, my reputation to provide cover for criminals who were systematically destroying the wrestlers I was supposed to protect." But standing in that ring, facing Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker while Roman Reigns lay motionless at their feet, Adam Pearce made a decision that would define his legacy and send shockwaves through the wrestling industry. "No more," Pearce declared with finality. "No more corporate protection, no more diplomatic solutions, no more pretending that you're wrestlers instead of criminals. Tonight, this ends." What happened next was captured on dozens of cell phone cameras and has already become the most shared piece of wrestling-related content in social media history. Adam Pearce, the mild-mannered general manager who had spent years avoiding physical confrontation, pulled out a sock filled with quarters and delivered a shot to Bronson Reed's face that dropped the 300-pound monster like he'd been hit by a sledgehammer. The sound of that shot was like a gunshot, one witness recalled with awe. Reed went down immediately, out cold, bleeding from his nose and mouth. Pearce had put everything he had into that shot, months of frustration and rage channeled into one devastating blow. But Pearce's assault on Reed wasn't random violence or emotional outburst, it was calculated justice designed to send a message that would resonate throughout the wrestling industry and beyond. "This is what happens when you cross the line from entertainment to criminal assault," Pearce declared, standing over Reed's unconscious form. "This is what happens when you think corporate protection makes you untouchable. This is what happens when you forget that even authority figures have breaking points." The symbolic power of Adam Pearce, representing corporate authority and legal order, delivering street justice to a criminal who had operated with impunity for months, sent a message that transcended wrestling storylines and spoke to fundamental questions about justice and accountability. Reed and Breaker thought their size, their violence, and their corporate backing made them immune to consequences. Pearce continued his verbal destruction while Reed remained motionless at his feet. They forgot that justice doesn't always come through official channels, and that some people will only respond to force. But Pearce's assault on Reed was just the beginning of his campaign to restore order to Monday Night Raw and eliminate the criminal element that had turned his show into a weekly exhibition of systematic brutality. Braun Breaker, Pearce addressed Reed's partner with cold authority. "You have exactly 10 seconds to decide whether you want to face the same justice I just delivered to your partner, or whether you want to walk away and never come back." The ultimatum that Pearce delivered to Breaker represented more than just a threat, it was an offer of mercy to someone who might still be salvageable, unlike his partner who had clearly moved beyond any possibility of redemption. "I'm not like Reed," Breaker's voice shook with obvious fear as he realized that his months of corporate protection had just evaporated with one loaded sock to his partner's face. "I was just following orders, just doing what I was told to do by people with more authority than me." But Pearce's investigation had uncovered evidence that Breaker was far more complicit in the conspiracy than he was claiming, making his plea for mercy ring hollow in the face of documented criminal behavior. "Following orders," Pearce's voice dripped with contempt. "The same excuse used by every war criminal in history. The same justification offered by everyone who chooses money over morality, corporate advancement over basic human decency." The comparison between Breaker's corporate complicity and historical war crimes elevated the moral stakes of the confrontation and made it clear that Pearce viewed their actions as genuine evil rather than simple wrestling villainy. "You had choices, Braun," Pearce continued his moral education. "Every time you attacked an innocent wrestler, every time you participated in Reed's campaigns of systematic brutality, every time you collected bonus money for ending careers, you made choices." But Pearce's most damaging revelation concerned Breaker's specific role in the conspiracy against Roman Reigns, showing that his participation went far beyond simply following orders. "You suggested targeting Roman's family," Pearce announced, his words causing visible horror among everyone in attendance. "Your idea to threaten his children, your plan to attack his wife, your recommendation to make the elimination personal and permanent." The revelation that Breaker had been the architect of plans to target Roman's innocent family members elevated his crimes beyond simple assault into the realm of terrorism designed to destroy an entire family through systematic violence. "Following orders doesn't explain why you volunteered to hurt children." Pearce's voice carried moral authority that made everyone understand this was about fundamental questions of good and evil. Corporate compliance doesn't justify planning to assault pregnant women and elderly family members. But faced with the choice between accepting responsibility for his crimes or facing the same loaded sock justice that had eliminated his partner, Braun Breaker made a decision that surprised everyone in attendance. "I quit," Breaker announced, his voice barely audible as he backed toward the exit. "I'm done with wrestling, done with WWE, done with everything. I just want to get out of here before you do to me what you did to Reed." The abject surrender of Braun Breaker, who had spent months terrorizing WWE's roster with apparent invincibility, demonstrated the power of moral authority backed by physical consequences to restore order where corporate discipline had failed. "Smart choice," Pearce acknowledged with grim satisfaction. "But quitting WWE doesn't make you immune to legal consequences for the crimes you've committed." Federal investigators will be contacting you soon. The promise of continued legal pursuit even after Breaker's wrestling career ended served notice that the Justice Pearce was delivering extended beyond just workplace discipline into genuine criminal accountability. But with Reed unconscious and Breaker fleeing the arena, Pearce's attention turned to the broader conspiracy that had enabled their months of criminal behavior and the corporate officials who had funded and protected their assassination campaign. This corruption goes deeper than just two criminals with corporate backing, Pearce announced to the cameras that were broadcasting his revelations to millions of viewers. This is about systematic criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of sports entertainment. The expansion of Pearce's accusations to include WWE's senior leadership transformed his confrontation with Reed and Breaker from isolated incident into the opening shot of a war against corporate corruption. Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, Nick Khan, you all thought you could use criminals as your enforcement arm while maintaining plausible deniability. Pearce continued his systematic exposure of executive complicity. But I have evidence, I have recordings, and I have witness testimony that will destroy your careers and put you in prison. The threat of criminal prosecution for WWE's top executives sent shockwaves through the wrestling industry and suggested that Pearce's investigation had uncovered evidence that could bring down the entire corporate structure. The FBI will be receiving copies of all documentation tomorrow morning, Pearce announced, making it clear that his justice campaign would extend far beyond physical confrontation into legitimate legal channels. Bank records, email communications, recorded conversations, everything needed to prove criminal conspiracy and racketeering charges. But perhaps Pearce's most powerful statement concerned his transformation from corporate employee into independent moral authority willing to risk everything to expose corruption and protect innocent performers. I'm done being WWE's general manager, Pearce declared with finality. I refuse to continue providing cover for criminals, refuse to enable systematic assault against wrestlers, refuse to pretend that entertainment justifies attempted murder. The resignation of Adam Pearce from his corporate position represented more than just personal protest, it was a declaration that some principles are more important than career security and corporate loyalty. Every wrestler deserves to work without fearing for their lives, Pearce continued his moral manifesto. Every performer has the right to basic safety, fair treatment, and protection from criminal assault by their own colleagues. But Pearce's most significant revelation concerned his plans for the future and his determination to continue fighting for wrestler safety and corporate accountability even outside the WWE system. I'm starting an independent investigation firm, Pearce announced, revealing plans that could fundamentally transform how wrestling handles corruption and criminal behavior. Wrestlers who are being threatened, assaulted, or exploited will have somewhere to turn for real protection and genuine justice. The announcement of an independent protection service for wrestlers represented a direct challenge to the corporate control system that had enabled Reed and Breaker's crimes and protected their executive sponsors. No more corporate cover UPS, no more executive immunity, no more pretending that systematic criminal behavior is just wrestling storylines, Pearce promised. Real investigations, real evidence, real consequences for everyone involved. But standing in that ring over Bronson Reed's unconscious form, with Braun Breaker fleeing in terror and Roman Reigns slowly regaining consciousness, Adam Pearce had accomplished something that seemed impossible just hours earlier. He had restored justice to a system that had been completely corrupted by criminal conspiracy. Reed will never wrestle again, Pearce observed with clinical satisfaction. Not because of corporate discipline or storyline developments, but because he no longer has the physical or mental capability to continue his criminal career. The permanent elimination of Bronson Reed as a threat to WWE's roster through one decisive act of justice demonstrated the effectiveness of moral authority backed by appropriate force when official channels have been corrupted. This is how justice works when corporate systems fail, Pearce explained to the cameras. When executives enable criminals, when legal channels are blocked, when innocent people are being systematically destroyed, sometimes individual moral courage has to step forward and restore order. But perhaps the most important outcome of Pearce's confrontation with Reed and Breaker was the message it sent to other potential corporate criminals and the wrestlers who might be threatened by them. Every executive who thinks they can hire assassins to eliminate troublesome wrestlers now knows that someone is watching, someone is investigating, and someone is willing to deliver consequences, Pearce declared with authority that made everyone understand this was about deterrence as well as justice. The deterrent effect of Pearce's actions extended far beyond WWE to influence the entire wrestling industry's approach to performer safety and corporate accountability. Every wrestler who has been living in fear of systematic assault now knows that moral courage still exists, that some people will risk everything to protect innocent performers, and that criminals will eventually face justice regardless of their corporate protection, Pearce continued his industry-wide message. But as Adam Pearce helped Roman Reigns to his feet and surveyed the destruction he had wrought on the criminal conspiracy that had nearly destroyed WWE's moral foundation, he understood that his war against corruption was just beginning. This is day one of a new era, Pearce declared with determination that made everyone understand he was committed to long-term transformation rather than just immediate justice. An era where wrestlers are protected, where corporate criminals are prosecuted, and where moral courage takes precedence over financial considerations. The wrestling world had witnessed something unprecedented: a corporate authority figure who chose justice over job security, moral courage over career advancement, and wrestler safety over executive approval. Adam Pearce had returned with a loaded sock and a moral mission that changed everything. Bronson Reed would never be the same, corporate criminals were on notice, and wrestling finally had a champion willing to fight for what's right regardless of the personal cost. The sock herd round the wrestling world had delivered more than just physical justice. It had restored hope that good people still exist and that evil will eventually face consequences, even when those consequences have to be delivered by unlikely heroes with improvised weapons and unshakable moral conviction. Everything had changed, and it started with one man who decided that enough was finally enough.